Now it's time for this year's Nobel Peace.
Your Majesty,
Your Royal Highness,
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. the
the
democratic
peace
thesis argues
that democracy is an effective defense against war and conflict. Democracies do not go to war against each other, and with only very few exceptions, they go to war at all. The core value of democracy is citizen participation in public life. In addition, it includes a few freedoms, such as freedom of speech and freedom of information. This is a benefit for the individual, but it is in fact a basic prerequisite for democracy itself. Only where there is full freedom of speech and freedom of information can each and every citizen exercise their right to freely express opinions, elect leaders on an informed basis, and be active participants in public debate. For political leaders, it might be irritating and very uncomfortable to be scrutinized. The effect of such scrutiny is increased trust between leaders and the public at large. It is no coincidence that the same countries which score highest on ranking of press freedom in the world also top rankings measuring to what extent people trust their governments. Democracies come in many forms and are never entirely perfect. But it is a fact that citizen participation and the possibility of free elections and free information reduce friction among people within a state and between states. In an ideal world, democracy and basic freedoms should be available to all. Unfortunately, that is not the state of world affairs. Democracy is under pressure and in retreat. Freedom of information and freedom of speech are under decline all over the world. Democracies abandoning democratic ideals and sliding towards authoritarianism. War and conflict do not thrive in an atmosphere where propaganda might be ridiculed and where leaders are held accountable by the public. The planning of wars and genocide has never taken place in the limelight of the public eye. Bringing the story to the public may in itself prevent war. A free fact-based press is in the front line of efforts to defend the values of democracy, freedom of speech and information. The role of the press is to reveal aggression and abuse of power, thereby contributing to peace. This work is carried out unremittingly by journalists every day all over the world. The Nobel Peace Prize for 2021 has been awarded to two outstanding representatives of the press, Maria Risa, working in the Philippines, and Dmitry Muratov, working in the Russian Federation. The Norwegian Nobel Committee wishes to focus on the link between peace and security on the one hand, and a free fact-based press that defends freedom of information and freedom of speech on the other hand. Maria Ressa uses freedom of expression to expose abuse of power, use of violence, and growing authoritarianism in her native country, the Philippines. In 2012, she co-founded Rappler, an online news website for investigative journalism, of which she still is the president. Maria Ressa is a fearless defender of freedom of expression. Rappler has focused critical attention on the Duterte regime's controversial, murderous anti-drug campaign. The campaign has death tolls so high that it resembles a civil war. Risa and Rappler have also documented how social media is used to spread fake news, harass opponents, and manipulate public discourse. Dmitry Muratov stands out as one of the most prominent defenders of freedom of speech in Russia today. He is one of the founders of Novaya Gazeta.
Made it on my own. Made it on my own. I think that you'll agree that I made it on my own. Made it on my own.
And has been since 1995. Novaya Gazeta is the most independent newspaper in Russia today, with a fundamental critical attitude towards power. The newspaper's fact-based journalism and professional integrity made it an important source of information on aspects of Russian society rarely mentioned by other media. Both laureates have been the object Six journalists working for Novaya Gazeta have been killed. In the Philippines, a total of 89 journalists have died in the line of duty since 1992. And Maria Ressa has received death threats on public television from the Filipino president. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all international press organizations that document and report on the working conditions for journalists. Journalism is not always used to promote truth and peace. I'm part of the problem, such as when helping to spread propaganda and fake news. In Rwanda, the genocide started with radio broadcasts containing hate speech against Tutsis. Hate speech, fake news, and polarized public discourse are a problem in all nations today. With this year's award, the Norwegian Nobel Committee wishes to underscore the importance of free speech and a free of power is their victory. We need to stand on their side and be journalists in every part of the world working for the same. By doing so, we are defending freedom of speech and democracy and giving peace a chance. There is a clear connection between this year's Nobel Peace Prize and the 1935 Peace Prize awarded to Karl von Ossietzky for having exposed the illegal rearmament of the German Air Force. Mr. Ossietzky was the editor of the German weekly magazine Die Weltbühne, but later perished after harsh treatment in a Nazi concentration camp. The Hitler government refused to allow him to come to Oslo to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. With this year's Peace Prize, the Norwegian Nobel Committee honors the will of Alfred Nobel by identifying freedom of speech as a prerequisite for fostering fraternity between nations, exposing warfare, and promoting disarmament. And now it is my pleasure to call upon the Nobel Peace Prize laureate to step to receive the diploma and the gold medal. Would you please come forward?
The children get their medals and diplomas, and they also share the prize money, and around 8 million Swedish crowns. That's approximately 880,000 American dollars.
I call upon Maria Risa to deliver her Nobel lecture for 2021. Please take the stage.
Thank you. Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, distinguished members of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I stand before you, a representative of every journalist around the world who is forced to sacrifice so much to hold the line, to stay true to our values and missions, to bring you the truth and hold power to account. I remember the brutal dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi, the assassination of Daphne Caruana Galizia in Malta, my friend Luz Meli Reyes in Venezuela, Roman Protasevich in Belarus, whose plane was literally hijacked so he could be arrested, Jimmy Lai, Live Extra
with the Mitsubishi Xpander Cross.
languishing in a Hong Kong prison, Sunny Shue, who after getting out of more than 7 years in jail, started another news group and now is forced to flee Myanmar. And in my own country, 23-year-old Frenchie May Kumpyo, still in prison after nearly 2 years, and just 36 hours ago, the news that my former colleague, Jess Malabanan, was killed with a bullet to his head. There are so many to thank for keeping us safer and working. The Hold the Line coalition of more than 80 global groups defending press freedom and the human rights groups that help us shine the light. There are costs for you as well. At least 63 lawyers, more lawyers have been killed than journalists in the Philippines. At least 63 compared to the 22 journalists murdered after President Rodrigo Duterte took office in 2016. Since then, Karapatan, a member of our Courage on Human Rights Coalition, people killed, and Senator Laila de Lima, because she demanded accountability, is serving her 5th year in jail. Or ABS-CBN, our largest broadcaster, a newsroom that I once led, which last year lost its franchise to operate. I helped create a startup, Rappler, turning 10 years old in January. We're getting old. Our attempt to put together two sides of the same coin that shows everything wrong with our world today. The absolute law and democratic vision for the 20th century. That coin represents our information ecosystem, which determines everything else about our world. Journalists, that's one side, the old gatekeepers. The other is technology, with its godlike power, the new gatekeepers. It has allowed the virus of lies to infect each of us, pitting us against seeking out our fears, anger, hate, and setting the stage for the rise of authoritarians and dictators around the world. Our greatest need today is to transform that hate and violence, the toxic sludge that's coursing through our information ecosystem, prioritized by American internet companies that make more money by spreading that hate, triggering the worst in us. Okay, well, that just means we have to work harder. You know, in order to be the good, we have to believe there is good in the world. Right? An old T-shirt from Rappler from 2014. I've been a journalist for more than 35 years. I've worked in conflict zones and war zones in Asia, reported on hundreds of disasters. And while I've seen so much bad, I've also documented so much good. When people who have nothing offer you what they have. Part of how we at Rappler have survived the last 5 years of government attacks is because of the kindness of strangers. And the reason they help, despite the danger, is because they want to, with little expectation of anything in return. This is the best of who we are, the part of our humanity that makes miracles happen. This is what we lose in a world of fear and violence. You've heard that the last time a working journalist was given this award was in 1936, awarded in 1935. He was supposed to come and get it in 1936. Karl von Ossietzky never made it to Oslo because he languished in a Nazi concentration camp. So, we're here. Hopefully a little bit ahead, we are both here. By giving this to journalists today, thank you. The Nobel Committee is signaling a similar historical moment, another existential point for democracy. Dimitri and I are lucky because we can speak to you now. Yay for court approvals. But there are so many more journalists persecuted in the shadows, with neither exposure nor support, and governments are doubling down with impunity. The accelerant is technology, when creative destruction takes new meaning. You've heard from David, we are standing on the rubble of the world that was. And we must have courage to imagine what might happen if we don't act now, and instead, please create the world as it should be, more compassionate, more equal, more sustainable. To do that, please ask yourself the same question we at Rappler had to confront 5 years ago. What are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? I'll tell you how I lived my way into the answer in 3 points. First, my context and how these attacks shaped me. Second, by the problem we all face. And finally, finding the solution. Because we must. In less than 2 years, the Philippine government filed 10 arrest warrants against me. I've had to post bail 10 times. Job. Last year, I and a former colleague were convicted of cyber libel for a story we published 8 years earlier at a time the law we allegedly violated didn't even exist. All told, the charges I faced could send me to jail for about 100 years. But the more I was attacked for my journalism, the more resolute I became. I had first-hand evidence of abuse of power. What was meant to intimidate me and Rappler only strengthened us. At the core of journalism is a code of honor, and mine is layered on different worlds, from how I grew up, the golden rule, what's right and wrong, from college and the honor code I learned there, and my time as a reporter, and the code of standards and ethics I learned and helped write. Add to that the Filipino idea of utang na loob, literally the debt from within. At its best, it's a system of paying it forward. Truth and ethical honor enacted into this moment where hate.
Sobrang nagustuhan din ng kids ko. Ang Highlands Gold Corn Highlands Gold Corn Beef.
65 pesos only.
Lies and divisiveness thrive. As only the 18th woman to receive this prize, I need to tell you how gendered disinformation is a new threat and is taking a significant toll on the mental health and physical safety of LGBTQ people all around the world. Women journalists are at the epicenter of risk. This pandemic of misogyny and hatred needs to be tackled now. Even there, though, we can find strength. After all, you don't really know who you are until you're forced to fight for it. Now let me pull out so we're clear about the problem we all face and how we got here. The attacks against us in Rappler began 5 years ago when we demanded an end to impunity on 2 fronts: Rodrigo Duterte's drug war and Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook. Today it has only gotten worse, and Silicon Valley sins came home to roost in the United States on January 6th with mob violence on Capitol Hill. What happens on social media doesn't stay on social media. Online violence is real-world violence. Social media is a deadly game for power and money, what Shoshana Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism, extracting our private lives for outsized corporate gain. Our personal experiences sucked into a database, organized by AI, then sold to the highest bidder. Highly profitable micro-targeting operations are engineered to structurally undermine human will. It's I've repeatedly called it a behavior modification system in which we are all Pavlov's dogs, experimenting on in countries like mine, Myanmar, India, Sri Lanka, so many more. These destructive corporations have siphoned money away from news organizations, and now they pose a foundational threat to markets and elections. Facebook is the world's largest distributor of e-news, and yet studies have shown that lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than facts. These American companies controlling our global information ecosystem are biased against facts, biased against journalists. They are by design dividing us and radicalizing us. I've said this repeatedly over the last 5 years. Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without trust, we have no shared reality, no democracy, and it becomes impossible to deal with the existential problems of our times: climate, coronavirus, now the battle for truth. When I first was arrested in 2019, the officer said, "Ma'am, trabaho lang po." "Ma'am, I'm only doing my job." Then he lowered his voice to almost a whisper as he read my Miranda rights. He was really uncomfortable. And I arrested me because I'm a journalist. This officer was a tool of power, an example of how a good man can turn evil and how great atrocities happen. Hannah Arendt wrote about the banality of evil when describing men who carried out the orders of Hitler, how career-oriented bureaucrats can act without conscience because they justify what they're doing because they're only following orders. This is how a nation and the world loses its soul. You have to know what values you're fighting for. You have to draw the lines early. But if you haven't done so, please do. Where on this side you're good, this side you're evil. Some governments may be lost causes. And if you're working in tech, I'm talking to you. You have election in don't have integrity of facts. That's the problem facing countries with elections next year. Among them, Brazil, Hungary, France, the United States, and my Philippines, where we are at a do-or-die moment with presidential elections on May 9th. 35 years after the People Power Revolt ousted Ferdinand Marcos and forced his family into exile, his son, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., is the front runner for president. And he has built an extensive disinformation network on social media, which Rappler exposed in 2019. It's literally changing history in front of our eyes. To show how disinformation is both a local and global problem, take the Chinese information operations taken down by Facebook in September 2020, a year ago. It was creating fake accounts using AI-generated photos for the U.S. elections, polishing the image of the Marcoses in the Philippines, campaigning for the daughter of Duterte, President Duterte, and attacking me and Rappler. Chinese information operations. So what are we going to do? An invisible atom bomb has exploded in our information ecosystem, and the world must act as it did after Hiroshima. And new codes stating our values, like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to prevent humanity from doing its worst. It's an arms race in our information ecosystem. To stop that requires a multilateral approach that all of us must be part of. It begins by restoring facts. We need information ecosystems that live and die by facts. We do this by shifting social priorities to rebuild journalism for the 21st century while regulating and outlawing the surveillance economics that profit from hate and lies. We need to help independent journalism survive. First, by giving greater standing up against states which target journalists. Then we need to address the advertising model of journalism. This is part of the reason that I agreed to co-chair the International Fund for Public Interest Media, which is trying to raise money from overseas development assistance funds. Right now, while journalists are under attack on every front, only 0.3% of ODA funds is spent on it. Just 1%, we could raise $1 billion a year for news organizations. That will be crucial for the global south. Journalists must embrace technology. That's why, with the help of Google News Initiative, Rappler rolled out a new platform 2 weeks ago designed to build communities of action. It won't be as viral as what the tech platforms built, but the North Star is not profit alone, it is facts, truth, and trust. Now for legislation. Thanks to the EU for taking leadership with its Democracy Action Plan. For the US, reform or revoke Section 230, the law that treats social media platforms like utilities. It's not a comprehensive solution, but it gets the ball rolling, a scale of distribution. So while the public debate is down here on content moderation downstream, the real sleight of hand happens further upstream, where algorithms of amplification, algorithms of distribution have been programmed by humans with bias. Their editorial agenda is profit-driven, carried out by machines at scale. The impact is global, with cheap armies on social media rolling back democracy, tearing it down in 81 countries around the world. That impunity demand defense of our values. We're at a sliding door moment where we can continue down the path we're on and descend further into fascism. Or we can choose to fight for a better world. To do that, please ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? I didn't know it was going to be here today. Every day I live with the real threat of spending the rest of my life in jail because I'm a journalist. When I go home, I have no idea what the future holds, but it's worth the risk. The destruction has already happened. Now it's time to build, to create the world we want. So please, with me, just close your eyes for just a moment and imagine the world as it should be. A world of peace, trust, and empathy, bringing out the best that we can be. Open your eyes. Now go. We have to make it happen. Please, let's hold the line together. Thank you.
Then we're moving speech and then it's time for the to
Thank you. Now I call upon Dimitri Muratov to come forward and give his Nobel lecture for 2021. Please take the floor.
Ваше Величество, Ваше Королевское Высочество, уважаемые члены Нобелевского комитета, уважаемые гости. У всех наушники есть, да? Утром 8 октября мне позвонила мама. Спросила, что новенького. Говорю, мама, вот Нобелевскую премию получили. Это, говорит, хорошо, а что еще новенького? Сейчас, мама, я тебе все расскажу. Я убежден, что свобода убеждений, наряду с другими гражданскими свободами, является основой прогресса. Я защищаю тезис об определяющем значении гражданской и политической свобод в формировании судеб человечества. Я убежден, что международное доверие, разоружение и безопасность немыслимы без открытости общества, свободы информации, убеждений, гласности. Мир, прогресс, права человека. Мир, прогресс, права человека. Эти три цели неразрывно связаны. Это из Нобелевской речи академика Андрея Сахарова, гражданина Земли, великого мыслителя. И эту речь прямо здесь, в этом городе, в четверг, 11 декабря 1975 года, прочитала его жена Елена Боннер. И вот я посчитал необходимым, чтобы слова Сахарова прозвучали здесь второй раз, в этом знаменитом на весь мир зале. Это очень важно для нас, очень важно. Почему? Мир разлюбил демократию. Мир разочаровался в правящих элитах. Мир потянулся к диктатуре. Возникла иллюзия, что прогресса можно достичь технологиями и насилием, а не соблюдением прав и свобод человека. Такой вот прогресс без свободы, такое вот молоко без коровы. Диктатуры обеспечили себе упрощенный доступ к насилию. У нас в стране, и не только у нас, популярна мысль: те политики, которые избегают крови, слабые люди, а вот угрожать миру войной – это долг настоящих патриотов. Власть активно продает идею войны. Под влиянием агрессивного маркетинга войны люди привыкают к мысли о ее допустимости. Правительство и близкие к ним пропагандисты несут всю полноту ответственности за милитаристскую риторику на государственных телевизионных каналах. Но я видел и другие телевизоры, которые показывали честные и страшные картины. Во время Чеченской войны на одном из вокзалов стояли на рельсах 5 белых вагонов-холодильников. Возле них круглосуточно была охрана. Это были морги. Морги на колесах. 124-й лаборатории Министерства обороны. В этих рефрижераторах хранились неопознанные тела солдат и офицеров. У многих уже не было лиц от прямых попаданий или пыток. Начальник лаборатории, капитан первого ранга Щербаков, делал все, чтобы не осталось безымянных солдат. И поэтому в небольшом доме